I had not set foot in New York in almost 5 years. And the first thing my father did when I walked into the conference room at Manhattan Trust Holdings was look at me like I had shown up with a subpoena. His glare was sharp, cold, like I was a virus that somehow survived the purge. The room smelled of polished wood and expensive betrayal. My sister, Isabel, was already seated at the table, legs crossed in that perfect posture she practiced since we were 12. Her gaze cut through me with quiet triumph. She wore her signature silk blouse and heels that clicked with judgment. She looked exactly like the kind of daughter that earned a seat at the table. I looked like someone who had not been invited at all. At the head sat Victor Monroe. My father. A philanthropist to the public, a tyrant to anyone who had dinner with him more than once. He did not stand. He did not smile. He just tilted his glass of mineral water toward the center of the table like he was already celebrating. The only person who acknowledged my presence with the dignity of a nod was Eleanor Kravitz, the family lawyer for as long as I could remember. Her white hair was pulled into a tight knot, her face unreadable behind a pair of rimless glasses. She had seen all of us at our worst. That day, she looked like she was about to watch someone get dismembered politely. I sat. No one asked how the flight was. No one asked if I had healed from the surgeries. No one asked anything, which was fine. I was not there for them. I was there for one reason. A promise. A quiet one made to a man who had whispered while hooked up to a dozen machines. Be in the room when the curtain falls. They need to see you standing. I did not expect him to leave me anything. I did not expect what came next. But I had never expected the man who raised me to burn $41 million in front of me. And smile while doing it. My name is Juliette Monroe. I am 33 years old, and I spent most of my 20s building machines that survive war zones better than most humans. I used to work as a mechanical engineer at a classified military base in Utah, designing defense-grade prosthetics for veterans who lost limbs to IEDs and bullets and bad decisions made by people in rooms like the one I now sat in. Before that, I served 4 years in the field, including a deployment to eastern Syria, where I learned exactly how invisible someone could become if no one wanted them to return. That invisibility followed me home. I just learned to sharpen it into armor. I had the look of someone who did not bother with presentation anymore. My hair was shoulder length, tied back with a rubber band I had on my wrist since morning. My shirt was white, clean, too plain for that conference room. My boots were regulation military, scratched but polished. I wore no jewelry. My only accessory was a small notebook in my inner coat pocket, the one I had used to write down Grandpa Harold's medication schedule. That pocket now held something heavier and more dangerous. People used to tell me I looked like my mother, which meant in my father's eyes, I looked like disappointment. She died when I was 16, a slow and quiet death that became quieter still when Victor told the press it was stress-related and then told me it was my fault. That I was too much. That if I had followed the script, she might have lived. Isabel never questioned that version of the story. She just stopped inviting me to family dinners. Harold Monroe was the only one who saw me. Not just knew I existed, but truly saw me. When I told him I wanted to enlist instead of intern at a real estate firm, he brought me a pair of boots that actually fit and a compass engraved with a single word, North. When I broke my wrist in training, he taught me how to write left-handed with his own notebook. When I called from a dusty outpost 2 time zones ahead and 2 nights into a migraine, he just listened. And never asked why I called instead of texting. His last words to me were not "I love you." They were more precise. He said, "They will lie to you. Make sure your truth is fireproof." The reading of the will began with silence thick enough to press against your skin. Eleanor Kravitz cleared her throat and opened the folder slowly, like she had been waiting years for this moment and was not entirely sure it would come. Her voice was steady, emotionless, almost sterile. To Isabel Monroe, she began, the estate in Cape Cod, all furnishings therein, and the full art collection held in storage at Whitmore Vault. Isabel did not smile, but I saw the flicker in her expression. She expected more, but it was still enough. To Victor Monroe, Eleanor continued. The remaining funds from the Monroe Charity Fund, with full oversight granted, and a non-voting consultancy role in the Monroe Holdings Board. That made him shift uncomfortably. He had expected voting power. Control. What he got was ceremony. But he kept his lips sealed, one hand gripping the armrest too tightly. Eleanor turned the final page. And to Juliet Monroe, she said, her voice now firmer, I leave the remainder of my shares in Monroe Holdings. Full voting rights, dividends from all domestic and foreign assets, and complete ownership of a wholly independent subsidiary, Blue Circuit Lab, now valued at $41.2 million. Transfer of control is immediate. The room stopped breathing. Isabel stiffened. Victor blinked once. Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek metal USB drive. She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. Encrypted verification and digital ownership keys are stored here. There is also a physical file containing corporate validation, including notarized proof of ownership. That file will be handed over following digital confirmation. I had not moved. Not yet. I had not even reached for the drive before Victor stood, grabbed it off the table, and snapped it in half between his hands. Then he pulled a small lighter from his pocket and lit the broken plastic and metal. Flames rose and hissed as the polymer warped, melted, then blackened, dripping onto the mahogany like poison. The room gasped. Eleanor did not. She simply leaned back. Victor turned to me. That's what happens when you try to steal something that was never yours. Isabel looked like she had just swallowed bleach. I said nothing. I did not flinch. I only watched the smoke curl toward the ceiling, dancing in the air like something freed. Then I smiled. Not the smile of someone amused. The kind of smile you wear when you already know the ending and you are just watching everyone else catch up. Because what Victor had just burned was not real. The real documents had never been in Eleanor's USB. She knew it. I knew it. The one that mattered sat quietly in the lining of my shoulder bag. A second USB, given to me 3 weeks before Grandpa Harold passed. He had handed it to me inside a manila envelope folded into a napkin during breakfast at a diner off Route 74. Do not open it unless they try to erase you, he had said. If they do, this will rewrite the story. That morning, I had thought he was being overly dramatic. Now I realized he had been preparing for war. Because Victor Monroe was not just angry. He was methodical. He had made it his mission to write me out of his legacy. Not just in spirit, but in law. I sat there while they talked over each other, demanding Eleanor produce a second version of the will. Victor accused her of fraud. Isabel questioned my mental state. The word unstable came up twice. I sat still, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I felt the weight of the USB like a coin of judgment, pressed close to my ribs. I watched the panic unravel slowly, like fabric coming undone one thread at a time. Let them talk. Let them burn. They were just confirming what Harold had already warned me about. They did not see me as a threat. They saw me as an inconvenience. But I had never needed their approval. I only needed their mistake. And now I had it. Back in Oregon, the first thing I did was power on my old laptop. It was scratched, dusty, and slower than it should have been, but reliable, unlike the people whose names were still printed on my birth certificate. I plugged in the second USB. No password, no flashy animation, just a folder labeled in my grandfather's all-caps typing. For Juliet. Inside it, there were 3 files. The first was a notarized trust transfer document. The second was a video file. The third was a zipped folder named Blue Circuit Lab, accompanied by a PDF ledger marked valuation, $41.2 million. I clicked the video. Harold Monroe appeared on screen, seated in the sunroom of his cabin, the light pouring in across his shoulder like it always did in the late afternoons. He looked older, tired, but not frail. His voice was steady. If you're seeing this, he said, then Victor has done exactly what I feared. He's not going to try to outlive you. He's going to try to erase you. He paused and took a breath. So I've made sure what matters can't be burned. He explained everything. That the USB Eleanor had would be fake. That the real proof had already been filed digitally, through encrypted systems, with legal backups in my name. You own it, he said. Legally, fully, and without loopholes. You don't need to fight them for it. You just need to confirm it exists. I sat in silence for a while after the video ended, the hum of the refrigerator in the background the only sound. Then I opened my banking app to check if the dividend account tied to the Blue Circuit Lab had updated. Instead, I was locked out. Then the screen glitched. Then came the error message, account deactivated. I tried another bank. Same result. I typed in my credentials again, slowly, deliberately. Still nothing. I called customer service. A man named Austin answered. "I'm sorry, Miss Monroe," he said after a pause. "But your account status shows inactive. Legally deceased, actually. 2 weeks ago." I hung up without speaking. I drove straight to the DMV. Waited an hour behind a woman arguing over a registration fee. When it was my turn, I handed over my ID. The clerk typed, frowned, typed again. "Miss Monroe," she said. "I'm not sure how to say this, but your record is flagged as deceased." "I'm standing right here." "I know, but the system says otherwise. You'll need to file a correction through Vital Records." "How long?" "Weeks. Maybe months. Depending on who filed it." The world began to tilt. I walked out, lungs tight, hands numb. The cold air slapped me. Across the street, standing under the skeletal branches of a dead tree, was a woman in a navy coat and oversized sunglasses. Her scarf fluttered slightly. A familiar blue silk. My mother's scarf. The one she said had been lost years ago. I stepped into traffic, walked toward her. But when I reached the other side, she was gone. No footsteps. No sound. Just air. At home, I tore open a locked drawer and pulled out a stack of letters my grandfather had sent me over the years. Dozens. Notes tucked into books, slipped into boxes. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. In one envelope I found an old brass key wrapped in a cloth napkin. It was labeled Lockbox 12B Langridge. I had never heard of the place. But I remembered something else. On my 18th birthday, Harold had handed me a similar envelope and said, "Someday, you'll need to prove that you were real. And that they were afraid of you because of it." I called a contact. A veteran named Lena Vargas. She used to run a legal aid group for female soldiers who had been dishonorably discharged over political scapegoats. I told her only half the story. That someone tried to kill me on paper. She asked if I had proof. I said I had a USB, a fake death certificate, a forged signature, and a key to a box I had never opened. She said, "Good. That means you're alive. Meet me tonight. And don't tell anyone where you're going." Langridge Security Vault was nothing like a public storage unit. There were no cardboard boxes, no rusted padlocks, no sliding metal doors. This was a former Cold War intel archive disguised as a generic accounting office. The woman at the front desk wore no name tag, no makeup, and no smile. She looked at the key I handed her and said nothing, just typed in a code, then led me down a hallway so silent the buzz of the fluorescents above felt like shouting. We reached a vault labeled 12B. She opened it without a word, stepped back, and closed the door behind me. The room was small, sterile, and windowless. Inside were drawers stacked into steel walls, each labeled with engraved plates. I found my number halfway down the left wall. The drawer slid open smoothly. Inside was a matte black envelope and a manila folder sealed with wax. The wax bore my grandfather's initials. I opened the envelope first. Inside, a certified cashier's check, same amount. Same date, same signature as the one my father had burned. Except this one had security watermarks visible under angled light. Taped to the back was a red sticker. Non-negotiable copy burned. He had expected it. He had planned for it. The manila folder contained a stack of documents, bank ledgers, legal authorizations, dated transfer of shares, control rights over Blue Circuit Lab. But it also contained something more dangerous. Email printouts, meeting notes, contract drafts, signatures, including one document dated 10 days before Harold's death, where Victor and Isabel had supposedly signed over a revised board agreement. And there, in black ink, was my name. My signature. Only I had never signed it. And the loop in the G was flat. I always curled it. Whoever forged it had traced it. Badly. I took photos of every page, every line. I returned to Lena's office just past midnight. She was wearing a sweatshirt that said "No Gods, No Gatekeepers" and sipping instant coffee from a chipped mug. Her apartment was full of open boxes, legal pads, a whiteboard that had diagrams of military corruption cases that could have sent senators into cardiac arrest. She took one look at the forged document and said, "This is textbook. They lifted your signature from military records, most likely your 2018 DD 214. She held it up to the light. scan lines, pixel drift, compression inconsistencies. This is a cut and paste job. I handed her the second USB. She opened the files, scanned through them quickly, then nodded. This isn't just about a stolen inheritance. This is wire fraud, interstate financial manipulation, identity erasure with state-level complicity. If they moved even $1 under your fake signature, we're in federal territory. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? Lena smiled. We build the shot. No drama, no fireworks, just facts with teeth. She picked up her phone and called a man named Miles. Hey, I've got something. High-value forgery. Financial. Veteran victim. Real name. Meet me at the office. Bring the clean laptop. Miles arrived an hour later. Late 30s, quiet, glasses and gloves. He unpacked his tools like he was performing surgery. He scanned my documents, overlaid them with the forged ones, and within 20 minutes said, "This is open and shut. I'll draft the affidavit tonight. Any court in the country will side with you." Then he paused. "But you've got to decide if you want to bury them with it. Or just walk away." I answered without thinking. "We're not just burning their house down. We're leaving a plaque that says, 'Here stood a lie.'" That night, we prepared everything. Lena filed for an injunction to freeze asset movement. Miles verified every document. And I wrote a message to a journalist named Nash Thorne. A man known for exposing military contractors and publishing the kinds of stories no one wanted to read out loud. I sent him a single sentence: "They tried to erase me. I have proof they forged my death, my signature, and stole $41 million in the name of charity." He replied 3 minutes later, "Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything. We're going to start a fire they can't put out." The courtroom was quiet, not because of reverence, but because everyone inside knew something was about to break. Sylvia Marsh, Lena's longtime legal mentor and my emergency counsel, stood next to me. She wore a dark blazer, scuffed boots, and an expression that made people twice her size sit down without being asked. Across from us sat Victor Monroe, flanked by 2 corporate attorneys with polished suits and no souls. Isabel was there too, in a pale gray dress, staring straight ahead as if trying to convince herself that this wasn't happening. The judge, Marcia Leland, was known for her efficiency and refusal to entertain theatrics. She had once thrown out a billionaire's entire testimony for trying to turn a hearing into a PR stunt. She looked at both sides and said, "We will keep this brief." "Counsel, proceed." Sylvia laid out our evidence like dropping surgical instruments onto a sterile table. The forged signature comparison, the fake death certificate, the real USB, the notarized documents from 6 months before Harold's passing, the certified check found in Vault 12B, the video files, both dated, both unedited. She ended with a sworn statement from Dr. Cora Linnell, the physician who had unknowingly signed off on my alleged mental unfitness, now testifying that she had been manipulated and misled by Victor Monroe himself. Victor's lawyers tried to push back, said it was a misunderstanding, that Victor believed I had abandoned the family, that Harold had been confused in his final months, that everything had been done in good faith. Isabel claimed she had just signed what her father gave her, never read the fine print, never questioned anything. Then Sylvia tapped her tablet and played the video. Harold Monroe appeared on the screen. The lighting was soft, but his voice cut through like steel. "If they're watching this," he said, "then they tried to burn what I built. But you cannot erase someone by pretending they were never good enough to begin with. My granddaughter owns what I gave her. I made those decisions with clarity, not kindness. They do not deserve my name. She does." The room was silent, the kind of silence that doesn't need explanation. Judge Leland reviewed the files, then looked up. "This court finds overwhelming evidence that Juliette Monroe was fraudulently declared deceased for purposes of financial manipulation. The transfer of shares, control over Blue Circuit Lab, and voting rights within Monroe Holdings are hereby reinstated and recognized as legitimate. Furthermore, any financial actions taken under the forged identity are nullified, and an investigation into criminal misconduct is authorized effective immediately." Victor stood up to object. The judge didn't even let him finish the sentence. "You forged the signature of your own daughter and burned a fake file to cover it. You don't get to object. Mr. Monroe, you get to sit." Isabel looked like she had been drained of color. She leaned forward, eyes wide, lips trembling, but said nothing. When it was over, I stood. No speech, no glare. I simply nodded to the clerk, took the reinstatement decree from her hand, and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the media was already gathering. Nash was there with his team. I passed them in silence. No statement, no vengeance-fueled quote, just the echo of my boots against stone. Every step said what no words could. Hours later, Monroe Holdings issued a press release claiming full cooperation with the investigation. Share prices dropped 9% overnight. Blue Circuit Labs' internal systems were transferred under my credentials within 48 hours. Their entire humanitarian division, the one Victor had tried to sell off before Harold's death, was now mine. The throne they burned had turned to ash. And from it, I stood taller than they ever imagined I could. But I was not finished. Because owning something and building something are not the same. And I had no interest in just holding onto a crown carved from family lies. I wanted to create something they could never touch. And to do that, I had to go back to where the erasure began. Not the courtroom, not the vault, but the foundation, the ground where I would raise something that could not be burned. Something that did not need their name to carry worth. Something alive, something mine. The building was unremarkable from the outside. Red brick, a bit worn around the corners, wedged between an old florist and a boarded-up diner. But inside, it was empty in the best way. Blank walls, tall windows that had not seen proper light in years. Dust still settled in quiet places. But to me, it was a beginning. It was the address scribbled in my grandfather's handwriting on the back of the final envelope. He had circled it 3 times. Below the address, he had written 4 words in block letters. Make something they can't erase. I stood in the middle of the floor, blueprint in hand, and let the silence take shape around me. I did not want a monument. I wanted a place that worked. I filed the paperwork that same afternoon. Reinstated the old LLC I had formed years ago, Grieveways Insight Group, and renamed it with 3 words that told the whole story. The Monroe Initiative, not for the man who tried to bury me, but for the man who made sure I knew how to rise. Within 2 weeks, the contractors arrived. Paint, rewiring, HVAC, security installations. I chose everything myself, not because I needed control, but because I finally had it. No one looking over my shoulder. No one suggesting I soften the vision. The front windows were repaired. I had them etched with a single line, veterans. Women. Forward. Quiet. Unapologetic. Clear. The first program launched in under a month. A legal aid fund for female veterans facing discharge discrimination. The second was a mentorship network connecting young ROTC women with experienced field officers. I called it Operation Second Voice. Lena joined the board pro bono. Nash handled the press quietly, without spotlight, just enough to make sure the right eyes saw the work. Miles set up the secure file system. When I asked why he still bothered after the courtroom was done, he simply said, because clean ground is rare. And you're building on it. One morning, I found an envelope in the foundation mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photo of me and my grandfather sitting on the porch when I was 7, both wearing paper crowns made from birthday wrapping. On the back he had written, "Takes more than fire to stop royalty." I pinned it to the wall in the main hallway. No frame, just 2 thumbtacks. Let it sit raw. That same week, a woman named Tori arrived. She had been dishonorably discharged after reporting harassment in her unit. She found our website and sent a message asking only one question: do you believe people who lost everything can still start something? I called her that night. We spoke for nearly 3 hours. She did not ask for money. Just for someone to listen. To not treat her like a liability. I opened a new file and wrote her name at the top. Client 01. A beginning, not of war, not of revenge, of weight placed where it belonged, of fire that stayed warm, not destructive. One afternoon, I saw Isabel across the street. She had just come out of a lawyer's office. She wore a navy dress and sunglasses too large for her face. She looked over, saw me standing in front of the foundation, paused, then turned away. No words, no apologies, and that was enough. I did not hate her. I simply had no space left for her in the life she tried to sign me out of. Later that night, I returned to the new office. Not the foundation. A second space. Smaller. Narrow. A studio I had quietly purchased 2 blocks away. No one knew about it yet. That was the point. In the final envelope from my grandfather was a sketch of this place, a half-complete business license, and one line underlined twice. Some legacies are not inherited. They are built, brick by brick. I sat cross-legged on the floor with a pencil, drawing a new layout. A training space, a hub for women transitioning out of military life. Career advice, skills workshops, therapy support, a space with doors that locked behind you, not in front of you. Where nothing needed permission to exist. No ribbon cutting, no speeches, just purpose, just presence, just truth. I stood by the front window before leaving, looked at my reflection, and saw no soldier, no orphan. No ghost. I saw someone solid, someone who was supposed to vanish but chose to build instead. And in that stillness, I understood what Grandpa meant when he said fireproof. He did not mean to resist the flame. He meant to make something so honest, no fire could lie about it. The courthouse was quieter than I remembered. No reporters, no curious onlookers, no family members faking concern or offering hollow glances. Just fluorescent lights, scratched linoleum, and the smell of sealed documents. I approached the counter with a folder in my hand, inside, the final deed transfer. Blue Circuit Lab was already under my name. But this was something else. A smaller property, the studio, the place where nothing had existed before I stepped inside. I handed the folder to the clerk. She flipped through the pages, glanced at her monitor, and nodded. All set, she said. Effective immediately. She stamped it twice. One copy for the county. One for my records. One I held in my hand, warm from the printer. Marked with the embossed seal of something no one could erase this time. I stepped outside and paused on the courthouse steps. The sun had broken through a narrow slit in the clouds, casting a soft line of light across the pavement. I lifted the deed, not high like a trophy, just enough to see it against the stone walls behind me. I took one photo. No smile, no caption, no moment of glory, just proof. Then I put my phone away and walked. 5 blocks later, I reached the new space. No signs, no logos, not yet. The interior was still raw, unfinished wood, wires hanging from the ceiling, windows streaked with dust. But it already breathed better than any building my family had ever claimed. On the counter sat the last unopened envelope from my grandfather. Inside, I found a folded sheet of paper with sketched floor plans and handwritten notes in the margins. He had outlined a vision for something called Grieveways Forward. Not a company, a concept. A transitional hub for women veterans re-entering civilian life. Counseling, housing assistance, career realignment. A place where no one had to explain the darkness they carried or why they did not smile in group photos. At the bottom of the page he had written in blue ink, underlined twice, "Build what you needed 10 years ago." So I did. I called in permits. Contacted old friends from deployment. Reached out to every woman I had met who said, "I don't know where to start." Within a month, we had a draft program. No slogans, no marketing fluff, just direct help, small grants, job referrals, mental health navigation. The goal was never scale. It was survival that did not feel like punishment. One afternoon, while setting up used chairs in the reception area, I received a letter. It came from a correctional facility across the state line. From someone I had not thought about in years. Phoebe, my father's second wife. The woman who had witnessed the forged documents. Her letter was short, apologetic, but not begging. She admitted what she had seen, what she had ignored. She ended it with one line, "I did not know how to stop him. But I never forgot what he destroyed." I did not reply. Some things do not require a response. They just need to be set down somewhere and left behind. The first official day we opened, there were only 4 clients. 3 sat silently. 1 cried within the first hour. But no one left, and no one looked over their shoulder. We had a whiteboard at the front entrance with nothing written on it yet. I stood with a marker in my hand, thinking of what to write. I remembered a phrase Grandpa once muttered while replacing a broken window in his cabin. "What you rebuild must be louder than what they tried to silence." I wrote that, in all caps, underlined twice. Weeks passed. The space filled slowly. Donors came. Small press articles trickled in. Nash held off on the big piece. He said it deserved to grow in the quiet first. I agreed. I did not want noise. I wanted something they could never twist into a headline against me. No legacy built on revenge. Just impact. And then, one cold Thursday, I passed by Isabel again. She stood outside the foundation, staring through the window like someone looking into a home they could not return to. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched. And that was all I needed. She had picked her silence long ago. This one was just more honest. That night, as I turned out the lights and locked the door, I looked back once. The sign on the wall, "Grieve Ways Forward," glowed faintly in the dark. It was not flashy, but it was real. It was mine, and it would outlive every signature they forged. Because they tried to erase me. And I built something they could never touch. Something no fire could consume. Something that no court could deny. Not vengeance, not retribution, just something alive, louder than their lies, steadier than their threats. And that would be enough.